Rain beat against the iron bars, washing blood into the mud. Lyria knelt in the darkness, her fingers trembling as they brushed over the cold silver chains, biting into the creature's flesh. The dungeon smelled of rust and despair. A man, no, a beast, lay there, his body trembling between human and wolf. "Don't touch me," he rasped, voice cracking like thunder through stone. His eyes glowed a dangerous gold beneath tangled black hair, but Lyria didn't flinch. She had seen monsters before, men who smiled as they ruined their family. This one, though, looked broken. "They'll kill you by dawn," she whispered, glancing toward the guards above. The wolf lifted his head weakly, his lip curling. "Then you'll die with me." The chain burned her palm, yet she didn't let go. Somewhere deep in her chest, something ancient stirred, a pull she couldn't explain. Lightning cracked. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, and the dungeon walls seemed to vanish. The storm outside roared like a warning. Lyria's cloak clung to her shoulders, soaked and heavy, but she kept pulling at the lock. Each tug sent a hiss of steam as silver met skin. "Why would you risk this?" the creature growled, his voice thick with both pain and power. "Because you're not the monster they say you are," she said. Her voice shook, yet her hand stayed steady. Sparks flew as she jammed the key into the lock. It clicked. Silence. Then the chains snapped free, and the wolf collapsed to the floor. His skin sizzled where the silver had touched. Lyria fell to her knees beside him, heart hammering, the taste of fear sharp in her mouth. She had done it. She had released him. But before she could speak, the air changed. His breathing slowed, his bones cracked. Shadows swirled, twisting and reshaping him. The scent of rain and blood thickened as fur turned to skin. Before her eyes, the wolf became a man. Tall, scarred, terrifyingly beautiful. His eyes, molten gold moments ago, now gleamed like embers barely contained. Lyria stumbled back, heart pounding. "You shouldn't have freed me," he said, voice deep and cold as the storm outside. The torches flickered, bending toward him like they feared his wrath. "Who are you?" she breathed. He smiled without warmth. "The one they tried to cage." He took a step forward, bare feet echoing against stone. "The Alpha King of Elarion." Lyria's knees weakened. She had heard stories of him, the ruthless ruler who tore apart armies with his bare hands, the beast who vanished after the Silver War. And now he stood before her, unchained, his gaze heavy with something more dangerous than anger. "You've done something no human should have," he murmured, reaching out. His fingers brushed her cheek, cold and rough. "Now you belong to me." Lyria froze, the weight of his words cutting deeper than the chains ever could. "I don't belong to anyone," she whispered, her defiance trembling between fear and fire. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then amusement. "You will," he said softly, almost tenderly, yet his tone promised danger. Outside, thunder rolled like an oath. He turned toward the gate, flexing his shoulders as his power surged, shaking dust from the ceiling. The guards above shouted, metal clanging as they realized what she'd done. "Stay behind me," he commanded. "I'm not your pet," she snapped, but he was already moving. With a single glance, the steel bars bent outward like paper. The men rushed in. The Alpha's roar split the night, raw and thunderous. It wasn't just a sound. It was a storm breaking free after centuries of silence. When the last guard fell, silence returned, thick, eerie, alive. Lyria stood trembling, staring at the man she had freed. He turned toward her slowly, eyes darker now, unreadable. "You shouldn't have done this," he said again, his voice quieter this time, almost regretful. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because now the world will burn for it." He stepped closer until she could feel his heat, smell the wild forest in his breath. "They chained me for a reason, little human." The torchlight danced on his skin, on scars that told stories older than kingdoms. "And now that I'm free, He leaned close, his whisper brushing her ear like a threat and a vow. I will reclaim what they stole, starting with you. The torches died. The dungeon fell into darkness, except for his eyes, glowing gold again. And that's where their story truly began. Long before the dungeon, before she ever saw the Alpha King in chains, Lyria had heard his howl. She was 8 then, living in the border village of Seren, where the forest met the mountains. Every full moon, the elders told the children to stay indoors, to pray, to never look toward the woods. But that night, Lyria had been searching for her mother's shawl that blew away in the wind. When she found it tangled in the thorns, she also found silence. So complete, it made her heart skip. Then came the sound. A howl, deep and mournful, rising from the valley below. It wasn't like the wolves she knew. This one carried heartbreak, power, and something she couldn't name. She froze, the cold biting through her dress, her breath misting in the moonlight. For a moment, she thought she saw golden eyes through the trees. Then the earth shook. The howl ended, and the silence that followed would haunt her for years. The next morning, half the forest was gone, burned black. The elders said it was lightning, but Lyria knew better. She'd seen claw marks carved deep into the stone cliffs, too wide to belong to any creature of this world. From that day, whispers followed her. Some said she was cursed, marked by the wolf. Others said she was the reason the forest stopped blooming. Her mother kept her close, warning her never to speak of what she saw. Some truths are heavier than chains, she'd whisper. But Lyria could never forget those eyes, nor the echo of that cry. It was as if the sound had buried itself in her bones. Even as she grew older, even when the royal soldiers came years later demanding taxes, then blood, the memory of that night never left. She didn't know it yet, but the creature she'd heard crying in the dark, the one everyone feared, was the same one she would one day set free. By 16, Lyria's world had turned cruel. Her father was gone, taken to the silver mines by decree of the king's men. Her mother grew weaker by the month, coughing up blood that no herb could cure. Lyria worked in the village tavern, serving men who laughed too loud and stared too long. But every full moon, she'd climb the hill outside the village and watch the forest line, waiting. Sometimes she swore she saw shadows move like wolves, running under the moonlight. But one night, she saw something else. A man in black armor, dragging a silver chain that shimmered even in darkness. Behind him came soldiers hauling a cage. Inside it, she glimpsed fur streaked with blood. The wolf. The same eyes. Her breath caught. For reasons she couldn't explain, she followed them. Through the woods, through the rain, all the way to the iron gates of Elarion Fortress. The fortress was where the royal family kept their monsters. Witches, beasts, rebels. But what shocked her most was hearing that the beast in the cage wasn't just any wolf. It was the fallen Alpha King, captured by treachery and bound in silver to keep his power asleep. The villagers celebrated. "The terror of the north is finally chained," they said. Yet Lyria couldn't celebrate. The moment she looked into his eyes, she felt something ancient stir. A faint thread pulling her toward him, like fate, remembering her before she remembered herself. For weeks, she snuck into the fortress grounds, bringing scraps of food, water, and silent prayers. She didn't speak. He didn't look at her. But once, when lightning flashed, he met her gaze and whispered one word that made her blood run cold. Moonfire. She didn't know what it meant then. She only knew it was her name now. At least, the one he had given her. Months passed. The guards grew crueler, tightening his chains, laughing as they watched him weaken. And Lyria watched too. Helpless, furious, breaking a little more each day. Until the night she saw them pour molten silver over his wrists, just for sport. His roar shook the ground. The guards cheered. And that was the moment something in her snapped. She remembered her mother's dying words. Some truths are heavier than chains. Maybe this was the truth her mother meant, that freedom isn't given, it's taken. That night when the storm came, Lyria stole the key from the captain's quarters and crept into the dungeon. She told herself it was mercy, nothing more. But deep down, she knew. She wasn't freeing a stranger. She was answering a call that had haunted her since childhood. And as the silver chains broke under her trembling hands, the howl she heard that night so many years ago began again. Only this time, it called her name. The night she freed him didn't end in silence, it began with it. The Alpha King, now enchained, led her through corridors carved from stone and time. Every step echoed like thunder waiting for rain. Outside, the storm tore through the fortress walls, lightning bleeding across the sky. Lyria kept her hood tight, her heart louder than the thunder. When they reached the courtyard, he turned suddenly, his golden eyes glinting. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his voice a low growl carried by the wind. She wanted to say she didn't know, but lies caught in her throat. "Because I couldn't watch you die," she whispered. His gaze softened for a fraction of a heartbeat before turning hard again. "You shouldn't have," he murmured. "Now you carry my mark." She frowned. "Your mark?" He stepped closer, fingers brushing her wrist, where faint silver veins began to glow under her skin. "When you broke the chains, the curse didn't die. It moved. Into you." Lyria's breath hitched. She looked down at her trembling hands, the faint light pulsing beneath her skin like liquid moonlight. "What does that mean?" she whispered. The Alpha looked toward the sky, rain streaking down his face. "It means the bond is sealed, blood to blood, soul to soul." His voice dropped lower. "You're part of my curse now, Moonfire." Her knees weakened. "Stop calling me that." He smiled faintly. "That's what you are. A flame that burns under the moon, too stubborn to die." He turned away, scanning the shadows. "They'll come for us. The council won't rest until I'm back in chains." "Then we should run," she said. "No," he replied, his tone cutting through the storm. "You don't run from destiny. You confront it." The air between them thickened. She didn't understand everything, but something in her heart already knew. Her life had stopped being her own the moment those silver chains broke. They fled through the forest before dawn, their steps guided by moonlight and fear. Lyria's cloak snagged on thorns, her breath coming in ragged bursts. But the Alpha never slowed. His presence filled the darkness like a heartbeat she could feel but couldn't match. "You don't even know my name," she said between breaths. "Names hold power," he replied without looking back. "And I've had too many taken from me." They paused by a river glimmering under the fading moon. He knelt, washing the blood from his wrists. Steam rose where the water touched his skin, still burned from the silver. "They call me Kale," he said finally, his reflection rippling. "Alpha of the Blood Moon Pack." Lyria studied him, the scars, the quiet rage, the loneliness. "Kale," she repeated softly, the name strange but warm on her tongue. He looked at her then, eyes glowing faintly. "Say it again." She did, and the river stirred as though the forest itself listened. They made camp beneath an ancient tree whose roots twisted like veins.
The forest seemed alive, watching, whispering. Kale built a fire from dry bark, the flames dancing in gold and orange. The council cursed me, he said at last, staring into the flames. Said I defied the order of wolves and men. They chained me with silver forged from the moon itself. But it wasn't punishment for war, it was for love. His voice cracked on the last word. Lyria leaned closer. Who did you love? Silence stretched long. A human, he said finally. A healer who saw the man inside the beast. His eyes darkened. When they found her, they burned her for witchcraft, said she helped bewitch their king. He clenched his jaw. They didn't know she was carrying my child. The fire popped, sparks flying into the night. Lyria's heart twisted. What happened to the child? Kale's gaze met hers, filled with an ache older than the stars. They said she never drew breath, but I know better. The words hung between them, heavy, trembling. Why tell me this? Lyria whispered. Kale's gaze softened, the golden glow dimming. Because when I saw you, I felt her heartbeat again. The world seemed to still. Lyria shook her head. That's not possible. It is, he said, voice breaking with something fierce and fragile. You are her blood, Lyria. The last of her line. She staggered back, her pulse racing. Memories flashed, her mother's whispered prayers, the silver locket she never took off, the story she never finished. No, she breathed. My mother was just... She was the healer they killed, Kale said quietly. And you are the daughter they could not destroy. Lyria's chest tightened, her mind spinning between fear and fury. Then what am I now? Kale rose, stepping close enough that his shadow covered hers. You're the bridge, he said, between man and beast, between curse and freedom. He paused, eyes burning brighter. And whether you want it or not, Moonfire, you're mine. Dawn broke with blood on the horizon. Mist curled low around the forest floor, whispering secrets only wolves could hear. Lyria woke to the crackle of dying embers in Kale's voice, quiet, sharp, controlled. They found us. His tone left no room for questions. She sat up fast, clutching her cloak as the forest shifted around them, birds scattering in alarm. How? She asked. Kale didn't look at her. The silver scent on you, it calls to them. He crouched low, eyes flashing gold as his senses stretched through the trees. Hunters, he muttered. 5 of them, maybe 6. His muscles tightened beneath torn leather, the scars on his back glowing faintly. Lyria's heartbeat echoed in her ears. She didn't know how to fight, didn't even know what she was becoming, but she saw the look in his eyes, the calm before the storm, and knew he did. Stay behind me, he said. She nodded, though her fear felt alive enough to run on its own legs. They came like shadows, hooded man with blades of moonsteel and arrows that shimmered silver white, the council's hunters. Lyria froze as one arrow struck the tree beside her, hissing with smoke. Kale moved faster than sight, shifting mid-leap, the sound of bones breaking, fur ripping through skin, and a roar that shook the sky. The wolf exploded from him, larger than any she'd imagined, black as midnight, eyes blazing molten gold. He met the hunters head-on, claws tearing through armor like cloth. Blood sprayed against the mist. Lyria ducked behind a log, covering her ears as the forest filled with growls and screams. But one hunter slipped past, his blade catching light as he lunged for her. Found you, witch spawn, he spat. Lyria stumbled back, tripping over roots. He raised his blade, then something inside her flared. Her vision turned white. The hunter screamed as fire burst from her palms, silver and pure as moonlight. When the light faded, he was gone. Only ash remained. Lyria fell to her knees, shaking. Her hands still glowed faintly, trembling with energy that didn't feel like her own. Kale shifted back, blood splattered across his chest, breathing heavy. He looked at her, eyes wide, not in fear, but in recognition. "Moonfire," he whispered. "You've awakened." She stared at her hands, horrified. "What did I do?" He knelt beside her, voice low. "You used the bond." He touched her wrist where the silver veins pulsed softly. "Part of my power flows through you now. You are no longer human." The words hit her like a blade. "I don't want this," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Kale's jaw clenched. "None of us ever do." He turned away, scanning the bodies, but fate doesn't ask for permission. Lyria hugged herself, the air still warm from her fire. Somewhere deep in the forest, another howl answered. The council's next wave was already coming. Kale met her gaze. "We need to move. Now." They ran until their lungs burned, and the world blurred into color and wind. Every heartbeat was a drum of survival. Lyria stumbled once, and Kale caught her, his grip steady, his warmth grounding. "You'll learn to control it," he said between breaths. "Control what?" "The fire, the moon inside you." His tone softened. "It's old magic. Our blood remembers." Lyria tried to focus on his words, but exhaustion blurred everything. "Why are they hunting you?" she asked. "Because they fear what they can't own. And they fear you even more." The forest thinned, giving way to a clearing where a ruined chapel stood, stone cracked, vines heavy. Kale pushed open the door, the air thick with old prayers. "We'll rest here," he said. Lyria collapsed against the pew, heart still racing. She caught his gaze again, something unreadable in it. "Why do you keep saving me?" she whispered. Kale looked away. "Because losing you would break the curse forever, and me with it." Night returned before peace did. Kale sat by the fireless altar, sharpening a blade he'd taken from a fallen hunter. Lyria watched from the shadows, her thoughts loud as thunder. The truth of her mother, the bond, the fire, it was too much. "Kale," she said quietly, "if I'm part of your curse, does that mean I'll die if you do?" He paused, blade still. "Yes." The word fell like stone. "Then we're both doomed," she said. He gave a faint, bitter smile. "No, Moonfire. We're both chosen." Silence stretched, fragile and heavy. Then the ground trembled, a low rumble that made dust fall from the rafters. Kale arose instantly. "They've brought something worse than hunters." Lyria's pulse quickened. What could be worse? He looked toward the shattered door as the scent of blood filled the air. "Another Alpha," he said grimly, "one loyal to the council." His eyes met hers, blazing golds again. "And he's here for you." The chapel doors burst open. Wind howled through the cracks, scattering ash and old prayers. Kale's hand went to his blade before the sound even registered. Heavy boots, a growl that was almost human. From the fog stepped a man built like a mountain, silver tattoos running up his neck like a lightning frozen in flesh. His eyes burned crimson, the mark of a sworn Alpha. "Kale of Blood Moon," he said, voice smooth as poison. "The council sends its regards." Kale's stance shifted, low and lethal. "Rothor," he hissed, "still fetching bones for your masters?" The rival Alpha smirked, "Still hiding behind humans?" His gaze flicked to Lyria, and his smile widened. "So this is the girl. The curse was reborn." The air crackled. Lyria felt the pull, a pressure in her chest that made breathing hard. Kale's growl deepened, primal and warning. "She's mine," he said. "Then you'll die with her," Rothor answered, drawing his blade of molten silver. The moonlight caught it, and the battle began. They collided like storms. Steel clashed, claws ripped through air, and sparks rained across the ruined chapel. Lyria ducked behind a column as Kale shifted mid-strike, his roar shaking the roof beams. Rothor moved faster than any human eye could follow, his blade carving through shadows. The sound of their blows echoed like thunder in a cage. "You can't protect her forever," Rothor bellowed, driving Kale backward. "She's the key. The moment she dies, the curse ends, and so do you." Kel lunged, their weapons locking inches from Lyria's face. "Then you'll never touch her," he snarled. Their strength cracked the marble beneath them. Dust filled the air, choking every breath. Lyria pressed her hands to her ears, but the power inside her pulsed again, begging to be unleashed. The silver veins on her wrist blazed bright, flooding the chapel with cold light. Both alphas froze, just for a second, as her energy rippled outward like a heartbeat of the moon itself. The light shattered the chains of sound in silence. Every candle flared white, every shadow fled. Rothor staggered back, his blade sizzling. "What are you?" he hissed. Lyria rose slowly, the glow in her eyes matching the fire at her fingertips. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with something older. Kale stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "The Moonfire prophecy," he whispered. Rothor's snarl deepened. "Then the council was right. She's the weapon and the doom." He raised his blade again, but Kale moved first, striking with the force of 10 storms. Blood sprayed the altar. Rothor howled as his wound burned silver. "You can't win, Kale," he gasped, dropping to one knee. "The council owns the sky. They'll burn the world to find her." Kale stepped forward, sword dripping red. "Then I'll burn it first." He drove the blade through Rothor's chest. The rival alpha fell, his eyes still glowing as he whispered his last words. "She is not what you think." Silence reclaimed the chapel. The smell of smoke and blood hung heavy. Lyria's hand shook as the light faded from her skin. "He was going to kill you," she said. "He was already dead," Kale replied, wiping his blade. His eyes softened, just for a breath, but his warning wasn't wrong. He turned toward her, every word edged in gravity. "The council will come in armies now. They won't stop until your ashes." Lyria's throat tightened. "Then teach me," she said. Kale frowned. "Teach you what?" "To fight, to survive, to use this." She held up her glowing hand. "If I'm part of your curse, then I'll share your war." Kale steadied her for a long, quiet moment. Then he nodded once. "At dawn, we train." He tossed her a dagger, its hilt engraved with the mark of blood moon. "Your first lesson, don't hesitate." Lyria caught it, feeling the weight of destiny settle in her palm. The moon broke through the clouds, silver and watching. Outside, the forest whispered of death and prophecy. Kale stood guard at the chapel door, while Lyria sat by the altar, the dagger glinting beside her. She could still hear Rothor's final words echoing in her mind. "She is not what you think." What did he mean? The thought gnawed at her like hunger. Kale looked back once, his silhouette framed by moonlight. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow you'll need strength." She nodded, though sleep felt impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames, the same silver fire that had destroyed the hunter earlier, now burning her village, her mother, everything. Somewhere deep inside, something whispered back. "The fire doesn't destroy, it remembers." She gasped, heart racing. Outside, Kale's golden eyes lifted to the stars. He could feel it too, the bond between them growing, pulsing, alive. And though he'd faced wars, curses, and tings, nothing terrified him more than the thought that the prophecy might be true. For if Lyria was not the weapon, then she was the beginning of something far greater and far more dangerous. The forest was still wet with morning dew when Kale's voice broke through the silence. Again. Lyria's arms trembled as she lifted the dagger, her grip unsteady. She'd been awake since dawn, her body bruised and aching. "You said to control it, not die trying," she panted. Kale circled her like a wolf testing prey, his eyes sharp, unreadable. "Control comes from pain. You don't master fire by fearing the burn." He lunged suddenly, blade flashing.
Lyria barely blocked in time, sparks bursting where steel met steel. "Too slow," he growled. She stumbled back, dirt streaking her cheek. "You're trying to protect yourself," he said. "But that's not how wolves survive." His voice dropped to a growl. "We protect the pack." His words stung more than his blows. She raised her dagger again, her breath steadying. "Then I'll fight like one." This time when he attacked, her movements were different. Calmer, sharper, instinctive. The bond pulsed between them, silver veins lighting faintly as she met his strike and held it. Cale stepped back, chest rising, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Better." His tone softened. "You're learning faster than I thought." Lyria lowered her blade, sweat glistening on her forehead. "Maybe because I've been fighting to survive my whole life," she said quietly. Cale studied her, the determination behind her exhaustion, the way her fear didn't stop her. "That's why the fire chose you," he murmured. She frowned. "The fire chose me?" He nodded. "The moon fire isn't a weapon. It's a spirit. It sleeps inside those who are strong enough to hold both mercy and fury." He knelt beside her, his voice gentler now. "But power like that has a cost." Lyria met his eyes. "Then I'll pay for it." For a moment, silence fell between them, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the rhythm of their breathing. Then Cale smiled, a rare fleeting curve of his lips that made her heart stumble. "You sound like her," he whispered. Lyria didn't ask who. She already knew. By noon they trained beside a rushing river. Cale taught her how to sense danger, not with eyes or ears, but through instinct. Close your eyes. Listen to the forest. Feel its pulse. She obeyed, the wind brushing her skin like whispers. She could sense everything, the flutter of wings, the hum of insects, even Cale's heartbeat. It was steady, powerful. Then his voice cut through the calm. "Now defend yourself." She opened her eyes just as he swung his sword. She ducked, rolled, and kicked the weapon from his grip. It clattered into the mud. Cale froze, a mix of pride and disbelief flashing across his face. Not bad. For a human. Lyria smirked. "You mean a half-curse, half-fire miracle." His laughter broke through the tension, rough and unexpected. It echoed through the trees, softening the edges of the war between them. For a moment they were just two souls in exile, teacher and student, monster and flame, bound by something neither could name. Later, as twilight fell, they rested by the riverbank. Lyria dipped her fingers in the water, watching it ripple silver under the dying sun. "When this is over," she said softly, "what will you do?" Cale stared at the horizon, his expression unreadable. "If the curse breaks, I'll rebuild what they destroyed. A kingdom where wolves and humans aren't enemies." He turned to her. "And you?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe I'll finally stop running." Cale nodded. "Then we'll make that world together." The words hung between them like a promise and a danger. She smiled faintly. "Is that an order, my Alpha?" His gaze darkened, but his tone was warm. "It's a vow." The forest around them shimmered with quiet magic, the kind that only appears before storms. Somewhere distant, a wolf howled, long and mournful. Cale's eyes flickered gold. "They're calling." "Who?" "The packs. They felt your awakening." His voice dropped low. "They'll either bow or they'll hunt you." Night fell heavily with wind and warning. Lyria lay awake, the sound of the river like a lullaby she couldn't trust. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire, cities burning, wolves kneeling, Cale standing alone on a field of ash. She turned toward him, watching the moonlight trace his scars. He looked peaceful in sleep, almost human. She wanted to believe there was more to him than the rage the world feared. But then she remembered Rathor's dying words. "She is not what you think." What if Cale was wrong about the prophecy? What if she wasn't his salvation, but his undoing? Her heart ached at the thought. As she drifted toward an uneasy dream, a shadow passed beyond the trees, eyes gleaming red, watching, waiting. Far away in the marble halls of the council,
An elder's hand tightened around a map marked with Kale's symbol. "She's awakening," he whispered. "Send the seer before the Alpha falls in love."
In the highest tower of the council citadel, where the moon hung closest to the earth, the seer woke screaming. Her eyes, blind and silver, glowed with light that wasn't of this world. "The bond is complete," she whispered, trembling as the air thickened with unseen power. The council elders gathered around her, their robes heavy with age and arrogance. "Speak, seer of shadows," their leader demanded. "What do you see?" She turned her head toward him, though her gaze saw through flesh and bone. "The moonfire has awoken, but she is not what you think." Murmurs spread through the chamber. "She carries the curse of the first wolf and the mercy of the last human," the seer continued. "If the Alpha King claims her fully, the line of men will fall, and the age of beasts will rise again." Silence followed, sharp as broken glass. "Then she must die," one elder hissed. The seer's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You cannot kill fire," she said softly. "You can only decide what it burns." Her voice faded to a whisper. "And it's already chosen for him." Far from the citadel, dawn crept over the forest, painting everything gold. Lyria woke to Kael's voice. "Up," he said. "We move at first light." She sat up groggily, rubbing her eyes. "Where are we going?" "North," he replied. "There's someone we need to find." His tone was grave, his eyes darker than usual. "Who?" she asked. "A seer," he said, "the only one who can tell us how to break the curse." Lyria's pulse quickened. "You think she'll help us?" Kael's jaw tightened. "She owes me." That was all he said. They packed in silence, the forest alive with whispers and birdsong. Lyria couldn't shake the unease curling in her gut. The seer. She had heard that name once before, whispered by her mother in a trembling voice. "Never trust the one who sees the stars too clearly," her mother had said. But there was no other way. The curse bound them both now, and every day it grew stronger, like a storm building beneath her skin. By noon, they reached the Wraith Woods, a place where the air shimmered and time itself felt uncertain. Shadows moved even when the wind didn't. "Stay close," Kael warned. "The forest remembers intruders." Lyria nodded, clutching her dagger. As they walked, she noticed shapes forming in the mist, faces, echoes of people long gone. Her mother's voice whispered her name once, soft as a sigh. She froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Kael turned, his eyes glowing faintly. "The woods test you," he said. "Ignore them." But it was harder than he made it sound. Every step deeper felt like walking through memories. At last, the trees opened into a clearing where a small stone cottage stood, half swallowed by ivy. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Kael's shoulders stiffened. "She's here," he said. Lyria glanced at him. "You've been here before?" "Once," he said quietly. "The day they chained me." The seer looked younger than Lyria expected, her silver hair glowing like frost, her skin unlined, her eyes blind yet piercing. "So," she said, without turning, "the Alpha brings his fire." Her voice carried like a song across time. Kael bowed his head slightly. "We need to know how to end this." The seer smiled faintly. "Endings are just beginnings wearing different names." Lyria stepped forward, uneasy. "Then tell us how to begin again." The seer's lips curved. "Bold, like your mother." Lyria froze. "You knew her?" "I knew her pain," the seer said softly, "and now I see it reborn in you." She reached out, her fingertips hovering inches from Lyria's face. "You burn too brightly for this world, child. The moonfire was never meant to love." Kael's voice darkened. "Enough riddles. Tell us what must be done." The seer turned toward him, her silver eyes reflecting his fury.
You cannot break the curse. You can only surrender to it. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Surrender? Ko growled. You expect me to let her die? The seer shook her head. Don't die, transform. The curse binds her to the old blood, to the first flame. If you claim her under the next full moon, you will be king of both realms, but she will cease to be human. Lyria's breath caught. What happened to me? You'll become the fire itself, a bridge between worlds, the last light before the dark. Kael's fists clenched. There must be another way. The seer's expression softened. There always is, but every path demands a sacrifice. Her gaze turned toward Lyria. Choose wisely, child of flame. A king's love can save the world, or end it. Lightning flickered through the clouds, thunder rumbling like a warning. As they stepped out of the cottage, Lyria looked back one last time. The seer stood in the doorway, her blind eyes glowing. The moon is rising, Moonfire, and so is fate.
The storm chased them all the way down the mountain. Thunder rolled like war drums, and the forest bent beneath the wind. Kael led the way, his cloak snapping behind him, every muscle tense. Lyria followed close, the seer's words clawing at her mind. A king's love can save the world, or end it. The rain soaked her hair, stung her eyes, but she couldn't stop watching the man in front of her. Every step he took looked heavier now, as if the truth had chained him more tightly than silver ever could. When they reached a small cave hidden beneath an overhang, Kael turned to her at last. We stay here until the storm passes. His voice was clipped, distant. Lyria dropped her pack by the fire pit, heart pounding. You're angry, she said quietly. Kael didn't look at her. I'm furious. At me? At fate. His eyes flashed gold in the firelight. It keeps asking for more than I can give. He turned away, his shadow stretching long and broken across the cave wall. But I'll give it anyway. For a long while they said nothing. Only the rain spoke, whispering against stone. Lyria sat near the fire, trying to warm her hands, but the heat inside her was stronger, wild, restless, alive. If the seer is right, she said finally, then I'm the reason this curse can't end. Kael looked over his shoulder, eyes softening. Don't twist her riddles into truth. She sees futures, not choices. But what if I'm not meant to survive this? She whispered. Kael crossed the space between them in 2 strides, crouching in front of her. Then I'll tear destiny apart with my bare hands. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. You think I endured chains for centuries just to lose you to prophecy? His hand brushed her cheek, his touch both tender and electric. Lyria swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. Why do you care so much? She asked. Because I woke you, and now I can't sleep without you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. The air between them thickened, charged like lightning before it strikes. Lyria's heart pounded so loud she thought he could hear it. Kael, she whispered, you don't even know if what you feel is real. The curse binds us. His eyes searched hers, fierce and unflinching. The curse binds our souls, not our hearts. His thumb lingered beneath her jaw, tracing the faint glow of silver beneath her skin. This isn't magic, Moonfire. It's madness, and I'd choose it every time. Her breath caught. For a second, she almost leaned into him. But fear won. She stood up abruptly, turning toward the cave mouth. I can't be the reason another kingdom burns. I won't. Kael rose, his voice breaking through the rain. You're not the reason, Lyria. You're the remedy. She looked back, tears mixing with rain. Then why does it hurt like ruin? Kael had no answer, only a look that said he'd bleed before letting her go. Outside, the rain slowed, but the wind carried whispers. Wolves, dozens of them, approached through the dark. Kiel stiffened, his head tilting slightly. "They found us," he murmured. "Whose pack?" Lyria asked, fear coiling in her chest. "Mine," he said grimly, "or what's left of it." Moments later, shadows emerged, wolves with eyes that glowed blue, not gold. They shifted into men and women, battle-worn, scarred, loyal. One stepped forward, tall and scarred across one eye. "Alpha," he said, bowing. Kiel's voice softened. "Thane." The warrior's gaze flicked to Lyria. "The Moonfire," he said, almost reverent. Kiel's jaw tightened. "She's under my protection." Thane nodded, but unease rippled through the group. The council spreads lies. They call her the Flame of Ending. Kiel growled low. Then they fear her already. Thane met his gaze. Fear turns packs into armies. Kiel's expression hardened. "Then it's time I reminded them who leads the wolves." His voice dropped lower. "No more running." That night, beneath the fractured moon, Kiel stood before his pack. "The council calls me cursed, but I call it chosen. We were never meant to kneel before men who built cages for gods." The pack howled in answer, their voices blending with the wind. Lyria stood behind him, her cloak billowing, silver light pulsing faintly through her veins. Kiel turned, his eyes meeting hers. "Swear it," he said softly. She hesitated. "Swear what?" "That no matter what comes, you'll stand beside me." She took a breath, her fear melting into resolve. "I swear." He nodded once, then he raised his blade toward the moon. "By blood, by fire, by the howl that made us, I vow to end the council's reign. I vow to free our kind, and I vow to protect her." The pack roared, the forest trembling in answer. In that moment, Lyria saw it clearly. This was no longer just survival. This was war. The night before the battle, the forest held its breath. Every leaf, every wolf, every heartbeat waited for Kiel's command. Lyria stood on a ridge overlooking the valley where the council's forces gathered. Ranks of armored soldiers, torches burning like a river of fire. "There are so many," she whispered. Kiel joined her, his cloak rippling in the cold wind. "They've forgotten what wolves can do when cornered." His voice was low, steady, but his hand trembled once before curling into a fist. "We can still run," Lyria said softly. He looked at her, eyes gleaming gold. "We've been running for centuries." He stepped closer, his breath warm against her ear. "No more chains, no more cages. Tonight they remember our names." Thunder cracked overhead, and in that flash of light, Lyria saw the beast and the man united in one purpose. She wanted to tell him she was afraid. Instead, she reached for his hand. "Then let them remember," she said. Dawn came painted in ash and steel. The council's army marched through the valley, shields gleaming with silver runes meant to burn werewolves alive. Kiel's pack waited in the mist, silent, unseen. "When I signal, follow the flame," he told them. Lyria frowned. "The flame?" Kiel turned to her, eyes soft but certain. "You." Her breath hitched. "Kiel, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "The fire inside you was born for this." He pressed a pendant into her palm, a piece of broken chain forged from his own bonds. "When it glows, unleash everything." His hand lingered on hers. "Don't hold back, not even for me." She wanted to argue, but his eyes made it impossible. The horns of war sounded, and Kiel's wolves vanished into the fog. Lyria stood alone at the ridge, the pendant pulsing faintly, her heart beating in time with the drums below. The first clash came like thunder. Wolves leapt from the mist, their howls splitting the air as steel met fang. Kael led the charge, a blur of black fur and gold fire tearing through soldiers like wind through grass. The council's mages raised barriers of light, trapping wolves mid-leap, burning their skin. Lyria's chest tightened as the screams filled the valley. The pendant in her palm grew hot. She felt the pull again, the moonfire begging to be freed. Her pulse roared in her ears. She closed her eyes and let go. The world erupted. Silver flames spiraled from her hands, arcing across the battlefield like lightning. The mages' barriers shattered. The soldiers fell to their knees, blinded by lights. Kael turned mid-strike, his eyes widening as the fire swept past him. But it didn't burn. It was shielded. It obeyed her. For the first time, he saw her not as the curse, but as the weapon destiny feared. But power never comes without cost. As the flames spread, Lyria felt her strength drain. The pendant cracked in her hand, glowing white-hot. Kael shifted back into human form, sprinting toward her as the ground trembled beneath their feet. "Lyria!" he shouted. She could barely hear him over the roar of fire and blood. "I can't stop it. It's too much." Kael reached her, pulling her into his arms as the fire raged around them. "Then let me carry it with you." He pressed his forehead against hers, the bond between them sparking like thunder. The silver glow moved from her skin into his, their veins blazing in unison. The energy burst outward, tearing through the valley in a wave of light. When it cleared, silence fell. The soldiers lay scattered, the mages fled, the wolves stood victorious, but the fire was gone, and so was Lyria's strength. Kael lowered her gently to the ground, his chest heaving, his eyes frantic. "Stay with me," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. "Did we win?" "You burned the heavens," he said, voice breaking. "Of course we did." She smiled weakly. That's good." Her fingers brushed his cheek, leaving streaks of ash. "Kael, I saw something in the fire." "What?" he asked quickly. "A throne of light, but no king sat upon it, only a wolf." His heart clenched. "Don't talk," he said, desperate. "You need to rest." But Lyria shook her head. "It wasn't the end. It was the beginning." Her voice faded, her hand slipping from his. The bond pulsed once weakly, then went still. Kael's roar tore through the dawn, shaking trees and sky alike. The pack knelt in silence, their victory turning hollow. In that moment, Kael swore an oath, his final one. If fate had taken her, he would hunt her to the ends of the earth and drag her back from its grasp, even if it meant becoming the monster the world already believed him to be. Kael woke to the taste of salt and smoke. The lake behind him was still, its surface reflecting only clouds now, no longer the doorway to the dead. His chest burned where Lyria's mark had branded him, the silver light pulsing faintly beneath his skin. "Find me before the next full moon," her voice echoed in his skull, soft as wind but heavy with warning. He sat up slowly, his body aching like it had fought gods. Around him, the forest was silent, too silent. No birds, no wind, only the steady thud of his heartbeat reminding him he was still alive. "She's alive," he murmured to himself, clutching the mark over his heart. "I'll find you, Moonfire. I swear it." He stood, scanning the trees, the familiar scent of rain and pine replaced by something colder. Silver. He wasn't alone. A shadow moved behind the trees, then another. Before he could draw his blade, a low growl came from the darkness. "Alpha, Kael," a voice rasped, ancient and cruel. "You walked through death itself. Now death walks with you." 3 figures stepped into view, wolves once, but not anymore. Their eyes glowed hollow white, their bodies marked with chains of smoke. Shades.
spirits of wolves who had fallen long ago. "What are you?" Kale demanded. "Remnants," one answered, "bound to the curse you carry." The tallest among them stepped closer, its form shifting between man and beast. "The fire you seek burns beyond mortal lands. To reach her again, you must claim the 4 marks of the moon." Kel frowned. "Marks?" "Blood, bone, shadow, flame," the spirit intoned, "each bound to a round the council tried to bury. Only through them can the fire be reborn." Kel's jaw tightened. "And if I fail?" The spirit smiled with teeth that weren't real. "Then she fades forever, and the world burns without her." The shadows began to dissolve, leaving behind the echo of howls and a trail of glowing symbols carved into the ground. Kel stared at them, feeling their pull. "Blood, bone, shadow, flame," he repeated under his breath. "Then I start with blood." The journey led him north, where snow buried the earth and silence ruled. Kel's pack met him halfway through the mountain passes, their howls echoing across frozen cliffs. "Alpha," Thane greeted him, his voice rough with relief. "We thought you'd—" "Die," Kel finished, his expression hard. "Not yet." He explains little, only that Lyria lived and that the war wasn't over. When he told them of the marks, their faces turned grim. "The first one," Thane said, "belongs to the Crimson Altar, the Temple of Blood." Kel nodded. "Then that's where we're going." They traveled for days, crossing frost-bitten valleys where even the sun seemed afraid to linger. At night, Kel dreamed of her, Lyria, standing in fire, her eyes calling to him, her lips whispering his name. He woke each time with his heart pounding, the mark on his chest glowing faintly in response. He didn't tell the others, but he could feel her pain. Faint, distant, but real. Every heartbeat was a countdown to the full moon. The temple stood carved into the side of a cliff, guarded by statues of wolves with ruby eyes. The scent of old blood hung in the air. "Stay back," Kel ordered his men. "This one's mine." Thane hesitated. "Alpha, this place, I know what it is." Kel's voice was low, reverent. "The birthplace of the first pack." He stepped through the archway, torches igniting on their own as if welcoming him or warning him. At the center of the chamber stood a basin filled with crimson liquid. His reflection shimmered on the surface, fractured. A whisper rolls around him. The mark of blood must be paid in kind. He drew his dagger, slicing his palm without hesitation. His blood dripped into the basin, and the liquid turned silver, swirling like a storm. Pain soared through his arm, crawling up to his chest, to the mark where Lyria's fire slept. "Kale!" Her voice echoed faintly from nowhere and everywhere. He dropped to one knee, vision blurring. The temple roared as red light filled the room, and when it faded, a new sigil glowed beside the one over his heart. The mark of blood had been claimed. Kel staggered back outside, his body trembling but his resolve harder than stone. The pack stared as the symbol pulsed through his skin, bright and alive. "It worked," Thane said in awe. "One down," Kel murmured, wiping the blood from his hand. 3 to go. He looked east towards the horizon, where the clouds split just enough to reveal the moon, half full now. "We don't have much time." Thane stepped forward. "Alpha, what happens if you collect them all?" Kel didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the cold stars above. "Then I bring her back, and if the gods don't like it, they can try to stop me." The wind howled through the mountains, carrying his words into the night. Somewhere beyond that horizon, Lyria stirred in her sleep, the echo of his oath reaching her. Her eyes open in the darkness, silver tears tracing her cheeks. "Hurry, Kel, before the fire burns me away."
The mountains faded behind them, replaced by a valley swallowed in fog. Even the air felt different here, thicker, colder, alive. Karel could taste the iron tang of magic on his tongue. "This is it," Thane said, unease in his voice, "the edge of the Shadow Realm. Wolves never crossed this border. Stories said those who did returned hollow-eyed, or didn't return at all." Karel tightened his grip on his sword. "We go in." The pack hesitated. "Alpha," Thane began, but Karel's gaze silenced him. "She's in there," Karel said simply, "and if I don't follow, I lose her forever." He stepped into the mist, and the world swallowed him whole. The light dimmed, sound vanished, and suddenly it was like walking through a dream made of smoke. Faces whispered from the darkness, familiar and cruel. His enemies, his father, even Lyria's voice. "Karel, turn back." He clenched his jaw. Not this time. He kept walking until the mist thinned, revealing an ancient bridge stretching over black water. At the far end stood a figure cloaked in shadow. Its eyes glowed silver. "To claim the mark of shadow," it said, "you must face the one thing you fear most." The shadow's voice slithered through him, cold and soft. Karel drew his blade. "I fear nothing." The figure laughed, a sound like cracking stone. "Then you'll die, lying." The mist thickened, swallowing the bridge. When it cleared, Karel was no longer standing there. He was back in the fortress dungeon, the day he'd been chained. He saw his past self kneeling, blood dripping from his wrists, as the council branded his name into the silver shackles. He heard his own roar, raw and helpless. "Why show me this?" he snarled. The shadow's voice came from everywhere. "Because power isn't born from strength. It's born from pain you haven't faced." The scene shifted. Now he stood in the ruins of Saren, Lyria's village, burning. He saw her mother fall. He saw a younger Lyria screaming in the smoke. "No," Karel whispered, realizing the truth. It wasn't the council who destroyed them. The shadow stepped forward, its form identical to his own. "It was you," it said. "Your rage called the fire that night. Your howl burned her world." Karel staggered back, the words hitting harder than any blade. "You're lying." "Am I?" the shadow hissed, circling him. "You swore vengeance before you ever swore love. Every death since then has been your legacy." Karel dropped to his knees, guilt crashing through him. The shadow knelt beside him, whispering, "Accept it, and I will free you." For a moment, he almost did. He almost let the guilt consume him, but then he heard her voice again, faint, trembling, defiant. "You're not the monster they say you are." Lyria's words from the night she freed him. Karel rose, shaking. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "I may have been destroyed once, but she made me build again." The shadow lunged, claws outstretched, but Karel didn't move. He let it strike. The moment it touched him, it shattered into smoke. The darkness screamed, the bridge crumbling beneath him. A silver light erupted from his chest, scattering the shadows. When it cleared, a new mark burned beside the others, the mark of shadow, cold and luminous. He woke on solid ground, the fog thinning around him. Thane and the others waited on the other side, their relief palpable. "Alpha," Thane called. Karel stumbled toward them, his skin pale, his eyes darker than before. "You did it," Thane said, staring at the new symbol glowing on Karel's chest. "Shadow bends to me now," Karel murmured, his voice distant, "but it takes more than it gives." He turned toward the horizon, where the first trace of dawn broke through the mist. 2 marks remain, bone and flame. "Where to next?" Thane asked. Karel looked north, the Valley of the Fallen. The mention alone made the pack shiver. That was where wolves went to die, a burial ground for every alpha who had ever fallen. "You think the next mark is there?" Karel nodded once, and so was she. His tone left no room for doubt. He could feel her presence now, faint, flickering, trapped between life and death, calling him closer with every heartbeat. The mark pulsed in time with her voice. That night, as the pack rested, Karel stood alone at the edge of the camp, staring into the darkness. The shadow realm lingered behind them, whispering secrets he wished he could unhear. He knew now why the curse bound them. It wasn't punishment, it was balance. His rage had birthed destruction, and her compassion had birthed fire. Together, they weren't meant to end the curse. They were meant to rewrite it. The realization chilled him more than any prophecy. "Lyria," he murmured, tracing the glowing marks on his chest. "You saved me once. Now it's my turn." The wind shifted, carrying a faint sense of smoke, her scent. It came from the north. Karel smiled, the first true one since she'd fallen. "I'm coming," he whispered. Behind him, the moon slipped through the clouds, now nearly full, casting silver light across the pack. They would ride before dawn, and if the legends were true, the Valley of the Fallen would either give him what he sought or bury him beside those who came before. The mountains faded behind them, replaced by a valley swallowed in fog. Even the air felt different here, thicker, colder, alive. Karel could taste the iron tang of magic on his tongue. "This is it," Thane said, unease in his voice, "the edge of the shadow realm. Wolves never crossed this border. Story said those who did returned hollow-eyed, or didn't return at all." Karel tightened his grip on his sword. "We go in." The pack hesitated. "Alpha," Thane began, but Karel's gaze silenced him. "She's in there," Karel said simply, "and if I don't follow, I lose her forever." He stepped into the mist, and the world swallowed him whole. The light dimmed, sound vanished, and suddenly it was like walking through a dream made of smoke. Faces whispered from the darkness, familiar and cruel. His enemies, his father, even Lyria's voice. "Karel, turn back." He clenched his jaw. Not this time. He kept walking until the mist thinned, revealing an ancient bridge stretching over black water. At the far end stood a figure cloaked in shadow. Its eyes glowed silver. "To claim the mark of shadow," it said, "you must face the one thing you fear most." The shadow's voice slithered through him, cold and soft. Karel drew his blade. "I fear nothing." The figure laughed, a sound like cracking stone. "Then you'll die, lying." The mist thickened, swallowing the bridge. When it cleared, Karel was no longer standing there. He was back in the fortress dungeon, the day he'd been chained. He saw his past self kneeling, blood dripping from his wrists, as the council branded his name into the silver shackles. He heard his own roar, raw and helpless. "Why show me this?" he snarled. The shadow's voice came from everywhere. "Because power isn't born from strength. It's born from pain you haven't faced." The scene shifted. Now he stood in the ruins of Saren, Lyria's village, burning. He saw her mother fall. He saw a younger Lyria screaming in the smoke. "No," Karel whispered, realizing the truth. It wasn't the council who destroyed them. The shadow stepped forward, its form identical to his own. "It was you," it said. "Your rage called the fire that night. Your howl burned her world." Karel staggered back, the words hitting harder than any blade. "You're lying." "Am I?" the shadow hissed, circling him. "You swore vengeance before you ever swore love. Every death since then has been your legacy." Karel dropped to his knees, guilt crashing through him. The shadow knelt beside him, whispering, "Accept it, and I will free you." For a moment, he almost did. He almost let the guilt consume him, but then he heard her voice again, faint, trembling, defiant. "You're not the monster they say you are." Lyria's words from the night she freed him. Karel rose, shaking. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "I may have been destroyed once, but she made me build again." The shadow lunged, claws outstretched, but Karel didn't move. He let it strike. The moment it touched him, it shattered into smoke. The darkness screamed, the bridge crumbling beneath him. A silver light erupted from his chest, scattering the shadows. When it cleared, a new mark burned beside the others, the mark of shadow, cold and luminous.
He woke on solid ground, the fog thinning around him. Thane and the others waited on the other side, their relief palpable. Alpha, Thane called. Corell stumbled toward them, his skin pale, his eyes darker than before. You did it, Thane said, staring at the new symbol glowing on Corell's chest. Shadow bends to me now, Corell murmured, his voice distant, but it takes more than it gives. He turned toward the horizon, where the first trace of dawn broke through the mist. 2 marks remain, bone and flame. Where to next? Thane asked. Corell looked north, the valley of the fallen. The mention alone made the pack shiver. That was where wolves went to die, a burial ground for every alpha who had ever fallen. You think the next mark is there? Corell nodded once, and so was she. His tone left no room for doubt. He could feel her presence now, faint, flickering, trapped between life and death, calling him closer with every heartbeat. The mark pulsed in time with her voice. That night, as the pack rested, Corell stood alone at the edge of the camp, staring into the darkness. The shadow realm lingered behind them, whispering secrets he wished he could unhear. He knew now why the curse bound them. It wasn't punishment, it was balance. His rage had birthed destruction, and her compassion had birthed fire. Together, they weren't meant to end the curse. They were meant to rewrite it. The realization chilled him more than any prophecy. Lyria, he murmured, tracing the glowing marks on his chest. You saved me once. Now it's my turn. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sense of smoke, her scent. It came from the north. Corell smiled, the first true one since she'd fallen. I'm coming, he whispered. Behind him, the moon slipped through the clouds, now nearly full, casting silver light across the pack. They would ride before dawn, and if the legends were true, the Valley of the Fallen would either give him what he sought or bury him beside those who came before.
The valley stretched for miles, carved from bone and silence. The moon hung low, full and heavy, painting the land in pale sorrow. Kale and his pack descended slowly, their breath misting in the frozen air. Every step echoed, as though the earth itself remembered every alpha who'd walked this path before. The ground was littered with fragments of armor, broken crowns, and wolf skulls bleached white by time. No living wolf belongs here, Thane whispered. Then I'm not just the wolf, Kale replied, his gaze fixed ahead. In the center of the valley stood a massive stone altar, its surface engraved with runes that pulsed faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. The mark of bone, Kale said softly. As he approached, the temperature dropped. Frost crawled up his boots. A voice rolled from the altar, deep, ancient, commanding. Kale of Blood Moon. He froze. You walk among the dead to claim what is not yours? He drew his sword. It's hers, he growled. Everything I do is for her. The ground cracked open, and from the shadows the first of the fallen alphas emerged, eyes hollow, bodies made of dust and memory. Then prove you are worthy, the voice thundered. The dead alphas circled him, each one towering, their forms wreathed in silver fire. Kale's pack stepped back, forming a perimeter but not daring to intervene. Stay back, Kale ordered. This is mine. Thane clenched his fists but obeyed. The largest of the revenants stepped forward, its skull crowned with ancient horns. You were the last to fall, it said, its voice a growl of thunder and regret, and the first to defy death. Kale raised his blade. Then I'll be the last to bow. The revenant swung, its claws slicing through air like blades. Kale ducked, countering with a strike that sent sparks through the darkness. The sound of steel and bone clashing filled the valley. Each blow felt heavier, each movement slower, as if the dead themselves were testing his will. Why do you fight? One demanded.
For love, another mocked. For redemption, a third whispered. For both, Kale grunted, driving his sword through the heart of one. The ghost screamed, dissolving into light, but more came, endless, relentless. He fought until his muscles screamed and his blood painted the snow. Yet every time he fell, he rose again. He wasn't fighting just to survive. He was fighting to be remembered. As the last revenant fell, silence returned. Kale dropped to one knee, chest heaving, the runes on the altar now glowing brighter. The ancient voice spoke again, softer now. You bear the weight of 1,000 sins. Then let me pay for them, Kale whispered. You cannot, but you can balance them. The altar split open, revealing a single bone carved with the symbol of the moon. Offer what is broken, and the mark shall mend. Kale hesitated only a moment before lifting his hand. Take it, he said. The bone rose into the air, drawing blood from his palm until it glowed crimson. The pain was sharp, but beneath it he felt something shift, something inside him breaking free. The mark of bone burned into his skin, joining the others, a perfect circle of unity. The altar's light dimmed, and from the shadows a whisper came, not the voice of the dead, but hers. Kale. He froze. Lyria? You're close. Her voice trembled. But hurry. The fire is waking. If it burns without me, it will consume everything. His heart pounded. I'm coming, he swore, gripping his sword. I won't let it end without you. They left the valley under a crimson moon. Kale's pack moved in silence, exhausted but loyal. 3 marks, Thane said quietly. Only one remains. Kale nodded, though his expression was grim. The mark of flame. He gazed toward the east, where a faint glow burned on the horizon. Not dawn, but fire. She's there, he whispered. Thane looked uneasy. Alpha, what if the fire isn't her anymore? Kale's jaw tightened. Then I'll remind it who it belongs to. They made camp at the edge of the valley. Kale sat apart, staring at the marks glowing faintly across his chest. Blood, shadow, bone. Each one pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, but now that rhythm felt shared. Half his heart beat for himself, the other half belonged to her. When he closed his eyes, he saw her trapped in a sea of flame, eyes glowing, whispering his name. The sight twisted his soul. He rose to his feet, restless. No more waiting, he muttered. No more gods, no more curses. The wind howled in answer, scattering ash across the snow. By the next moonrise, he would face his final trial or die chasing her light. That night, while the others slept, Kale stood beneath the stars, the cold biting through his armor. He thought of Lyria's laugh, the way her fire had felt when it touched his skin, not burning, but belonging. You called me back once, he said softly, gazing upward. Now I'll do the same. He pressed his palm to his chest, feeling the marked pulse. For a moment, the world around him blurred, and he saw her, standing in the flames, her hair glowing like molten gold, her expression serene yet sad. Kale, she whispered, don't come for me. I know you will. Then you'll die. He smiled faintly. Then I'll die loving you. Her image flickered, her hand reaching toward him. The fire isn't just me anymore. It's becoming something else, something neither of us can control. Then I'll tame it, he said. You can't tame creation, she replied softly. Watch me, he whispered, but the image faded. leaving only embers and silence. He turned toward the horizon where fire met the sky. "One more mark," he murmured, "one last chance." And as the first light of dawn touched the valley, Kale walked forward, toward the fire, the curse, and the woman who had become his both salvation and his doom.
The sky was burning long before Kale reached the firelands. Flames licked the horizon like the breath of gods, turning the clouds into rivers of gold and lead. Each step scorched the earth beneath his boots, but he didn't stop. The marks on his chest burned brighter with every mile, guiding him toward the inferno that called his name. Behind him, the pack struggled to keep pace. "Alpha, this is madness," Thane shouted through the heat. Kale turned, his eyes glowing like molten amber. "It's destiny." When they reached the final ridge, they saw it, the heart of fire. A crater miles wide, filled with dancing light and molten stone. In its center stood a figure, Lyria, or what was left of her. Her body blazed with silver flame, her hair a crown of light. The air shimmered around her, bending reality itself. Kale's breath caught. "Moonfire," he whispered. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes no longer human. "You came," she said, her voice both hers and not. "You shouldn't have." Kale took a step forward. "I made you a promise." As he approached, the ground trembled. The fire reacted to him, rising higher, forming shapes, wolves made of light, circling like guardians. "They're not here to protect me," she said softly. "They're here to contain me." Her tone cracked, a trace of the woman he remembered flickering beneath the divine glow. "The fire's alive now, Kale. It doesn't want me to leave." "Then I'll tear it apart," he growled. She shook her head. "You don't understand. The fire is the curse. It feeds on our bond. The more you love me, the stronger it grows." He hesitated, pain flashing across his face. "So what? I'm supposed to stop?" "You're supposed to let me go." Her words hit harder than any wound. "No," he said, stepping closer. "Every mark I've claimed, every battle I fought, it was for you." She smiled sadly. "And every step brought you closer to your end." The fire flared, forcing him back. "If you touch me now, you'll burn." He met her gaze, fierce and unyielding. "Then let it burn." He stepped into the flames. Pain exploded through him, but he didn't stop. The marks across his body blazed, pulsing in rhythm with the inferno. Lyria screamed, the sound shaking the heavens. "Kale, stop!" "I can't," he gasped, pushing closer. "You're mine, remember?" Her tears turned to sparks as they fell. "If you do this, there'll be no turning back." He smiled through the agony. "That's the point." The fire swallowed them both, light and darkness colliding, the marks on his chest merging into one blinding symbol, the final mark of flame. For a moment there was no sound, no heat, only light. Within that light, Kale saw everything. The first wolf howling at the moon, the first flame born from sorrow, the endless cycle of love and loss that had created their curse. Then he heard her voice again, soft and near. "You found me." He turned. She stood beside him, whole again, the fire no longer consuming her but flowing through her like life itself. "We did this together," she said. He reached for her hand, and this time it didn't burn. Outside the flames, the world was breaking. The fireland shook, mountains cracking, rivers turning to steam. The pack watched from the cliffs as the sky split open, light pouring out like a second sun. Thane fell to his knees. "Alpha," he whispered, tears in his eyes. Inside the inferno, Kale and Lyria stood surrounded by a storm of lights. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kale looked upward, his eyes glowing like stars. "We end it."
He pulled her close, their foreheads touching. The curse began with love twisted by power. It ends with love given freely. She nodded, her tears glowing silver. Together, they pressed their palms to the mark of flame between them. The fire erupted, not in destruction, but in release. The light spread across the world, washing over cities, forests, and seas. Silver chains shattered wherever they existed, freeing every cursed soul, every bound spirit. The wolves howled in unison, their voices carrying freedom through the night. For the first time in centuries, the world breathed. When the fire faded, the crater was empty. Only ash and silence remained. Then from the dust, two figures emerged, Kel and Lyria, hand in hand, their bodies no longer marked by curse or flame. The pack rushed forward, falling to their knees. Alpha, Thane breathed, with awe in his voice. Kel smiled faintly. No more alphas, no more tings, only peace. He turned to Lyria, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her eyes shone, not with fire, but with life. Is it over? She asked softly. He looked up to the horizon where the first dawn in centuries broke clean and golden. No, he said, it's just beginning. She leaned against him, their fingers intertwined. Around them, the land that had burned began to bloom, grass pushing through ash, rivers running clear once more. The wind carried the scent of rebirth. Kel closed his eyes, breathing it in. For the first time, there were no chains, no curses, no kings. Only love that had survived the fire. And as the sun rose, its light found two shadows, standing side by side, eternal, unbroken.
The dawn was quiet, golden, and impossibly new. The firelands, once scorched to ruin, now shimmered with dew and green life. Smoke had given way to sunlight. Kale stood at the edge of the valley, the wind tugging at his cloak, his hand warm in Lyria's. The pack gathered behind them, wolves and humans alike, the old barriers between them gone. For the first time in living memory, the air was free of the scent of blood. "It's beautiful," Lyria whispered, her voice soft as a prayer. "It's what it should have been all along," Teal said. His eyes scanned the horizon, rivers sparkling, forests reborn, birds returning to sing over ground that once burned. "We did it," she murmured. Kale smiled faintly, though his heart ached with the weight of everything it had taken to reach this peace. "No," he said, "you did. You brought the fire that ended the dark." She turned to him, brushing her fingers over the faint scars that remained where the marks had once been. "Then we both paid the price. And we both lived," he replied quietly. For the first time, the word lived didn't sound like a struggle. It sounded like a gift. They buried their fallen that afternoon, wolves, humans, even the broken blades that had ended too many lives. Thane led the rites, his deep voice echoing across the hills. "We fought not for kings, but for freedom." Kel watched silently, his expression unreadable. When Thane finished, he approached his alpha. "The packs are waiting," he said. "They want to know who leads now." Kel glanced at Lyria, then at the gathered faces. Wolves reborn, humans reborn. "No one leads," he said simply. "Not anymore. The world doesn't need kings. It needs keepers." The pack murmured in surprise, then bowed, not out of command, but out of respect. "You've broken more than chains, Kel," Thane said quietly. "You've broken the old ways." Kel looked to the horizon, the wind carrying the scent of pine and rain. "Then let's build new ones." He turned to Lyria, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We'll teach them to live without fear." She nodded, her eyes gleaming with quiet fire. "And to love without chains." Together they stood as the last pyres burned out, their light fading into peace. That night, under a silver moon, the wolves howled, not in mourning, but in rebirth. Lyria sat beside the fire, her head resting on Kale's shoulder. "Do you think the world will remember us?" she asked. Kale's gaze lifted to the stars. "Maybe not by name, but they'll remember the change." He paused, his voice softer. "They'll feel it in the way the wind no longer carries fear. In this way, wolves no longer hide their howls." She smiled. "And in the way love no longer feels like war." He turned to her, brushing a thumb along her jaw. "That's the legacy I want." The fire crackled between them, sparks rising into the night. "You know," she said teasingly, "for a ruthless Alpha King, you've become rather poetical." Kale chuckled, his laughter low and warm. "Don't tell anyone. It might ruin my reputation." She leaned closer, her breath brushing his ear. "It's already ruined," she whispered, "by love." He smiled against her hair. "Then let it stay that way." Days turned to weeks. The land healed faster than anyone thought possible. Rivers cut new paths, forests grew wild again, and villages rose where ashes once lay. Wolves roamed freely beside men, their howls no longer warnings but songs. Kale and Lyria traveled across the lands, helping rebuild what war had broken. Wherever they went, hope followed. The old stories of curses and kings began to fade, replaced by whispers of two wanderers, the Fireborn and the Wolf King, who walked hand in hand, bringing light to darkened places. Children grew up chasing the echoes of their names, believing that somewhere in the wilds the fire still burned and the Alpha still watched. "They'll tell stories about you," Thane said one evening as they parted waves. Kale smiled. "Then let them tell it right." "And what's the truth?" Thane asked. Kale glanced at Lyria, her eyes glowing faintly in the dusk, "that we were never monsters, but just souls trying to love in a world that forgot how." Years later, when the moon rose full and bright, a single howl echoed through the forests, deep, strong, eternal. And the distance another answered, soft as flame. Those who heard it said the sound carried peace through the land, a reminder of the love that remade the world. In the ruins of the old fortress, flowers grew through cracks of silver stone, and an inscription shimmered faintly on the wall. Here the fire met the wolf, and the world began again. Cal and Lyria were never seen again, but their story lived on in the hearts of those who came after. The wolves no longer feared silver. The humans no longer feared the dark. And when storms rolled across the mountains, the people would look to the horizon and whisper, "The Alpha King still guards us. The moon fire still burns." In every flicker of flame and every howl beneath the stars, their bond lived on, untamed, unbroken, eternal. And so, from the ashes of pain, rose a new world, not ruled by power, but guided by love. The curse was gone, the story was complete, and peace at last was theirs.